Welcome here. I'm glad you can join us. My name is Jason Clausen, and I am the pastor of the Open Door Church, and we're here in Manitoba, and we're meeting online because we love God, and we love each other, and we love our community. And so we're thankful that you can join us in this online community as we have moved online to deal with the Manitoba Code Red for the COVID pandemic. This was not in our plans, but this actually was in God's plans, and so we're not entirely sure what he's doing in this season, but we believe he's doing something good. And so while we're figuring out what he's doing, we get to share this time together, share it with God, and ultimately join together. So thank you for joining us, and I look forward to diving in this week. So you might have noticed something in your life, or in your friend's life. I've noticed it in mine and in some of my friends as well. And science and data tell us that it's actually on the rise and has been since the start of the pandemic, since the start of isolation, of quarantines, and of the kind of new normal that we're constantly moving into on an almost week-by-week basis. And so it's actually pretty major. You might have seen it, a lack of concentration, a reduced desire for your hobbies or pastimes that you used to enjoy, a reduced concentration timeline, so maybe it's hard for you to read a book, even a very simple book. You might find you have shorter temper, moodier, more erratic, poor decision making. A lot of people have found that they're either putting off or completely forgetting very simple routine tasks that they normally would have an easy time doing. It's part of something called brain fog. And it's actually well studied and well understood within a discipline called cognitive load theory. Now, cognitive load theory sounds fancy, but it relies on two main principles. Number one, our brains have a finite amount of energy they can use. And number two, working memory uses the most. So working memory is the part of your brain that's used when you're actually having to think about new ideas, new tasks, new rhythms. They're complex. Often if they're vague, the rules aren't perfectly clear, and high stress situations. So for instance, tackling a Rubik's Cube or learning to play piano for 15 minutes has the same cognitive load as hours of doing a familiar repetitive task. So you can brush your teeth with your brain mostly asleep, but if you're trying to learn a new instrument, it requires a lot of focus and a lot of energy, and you only have so much of it. This is actually why car dealerships make the process of buying a car take so long and have so many little discrete steps along the way. You see, they're leveraging cognitive load theory. They understand that when you're in a high-stress situation with high stakes, where it's not always clear how everything interacts, it's a little vague, and it's new, you're not commonly doing this, it becomes stressful. And it drains your brain power, and you become susceptible to poor decision-making and more impulsive decision-making. So that's why you're asked all these little steps along the way, and you're trying to figure out, like, is the undercoder a good option for the car? Is 3% financing over 5 years better than 4.25% financing over 3 years? And do I need the sport package? And how well will the leather hold up? And all these things. And you know these decisions will have financial and technical implications for years to come. You know there are right and wrong decisions, but it's not clear, it's complicated, and it's new, and it drains your brain power. In fact, when you're using your working memory, approximately 40% of your entire body's energy output is going to your brain to handle new tasks and new situations. 40% of everything. It means your heartbeat and your liver and your kidneys and your running and you're keeping your body warm is only 60%, and just your brain thinking is the other 40%. Now, living in that space of that 40% burn too long leads to stress. It leads to poor decision making. It leads to reduced inhibitions. It leads to anxiety, depression, anger, and social isolation. You enter a fight or flight mode. So we either start to run from our problems, which is fight, or try to combat and control our circumstances, which is fight. And this last year, 2020, has seen everything changing. Simple little things changing. An everyday task, just normal day-to-day life, becomes stressful and requires concentration. How do you do work or school online? How do you have a Zoom meeting with your new boss at a new company? If you do sales, how do you meet new clients? How do you shop? How to vacation? How to do Thanksgiving or Christmas gatherings. Some of you right now are planning Christmas gatherings and you're not sure how to do it. How to do church. That one's been a big one for me. How to homeschool. Some of you have lost your jobs or had your jobs change radically multiple times. Just a simple thing, for my daughter to do distance learning in spring, I ended up downloading like 7 or 8 new programs, and most of them were simple. But some of them weren't, and we don't have good internet at our house, and so we're fighting with the internet, we're fighting with new software. I'm teaching my daughter how to use an iPad, there's assignments coming, and it just made school twice as stressful as before, maybe more. This increases our cognitive load for just day to day. It burns our energy, and it burns your brain power faster, and it can leave you drained, stuck in that fight or flight loop. In short, it has a tendency to make us a worse version of ourselves that's less Christ-like. So fight or flight. I just want to zoom in and dive down on that for a second. Do nothing or do everything. So give up or try to take control. So the do nothing, the flight, is essentially victimhood of one kind or another. And it's easy to fall into victimhood and passivity under pressure and under extreme cognitive load, right? You come home from work and you're exhausted. And you know you need to do laundry or make a healthy supper, but that seems even more exhausting. And so you microwave a pizza pop and you sit on the couch and you drink pop and watch Netflix, and then time gets away from you and all of a sudden it's 11:30 and you're past your bedtime and you wake up the next morning exhausted before you go to work, exhausted before you come home, exhausted, kind of lather, rinse, repeat. And you're exhausted and you're stressed by your own schedule and routine. But you've become too exhausted and stressed to change your own schedule and routine. So you run from the problems and you bury your head in the sand, or you blame others. And we become a society looking for other people to blame. So that's the flight option. I think more common, although that certainly is common, and I feel for you if you're there, but almost I think more common than that is fight. Right? It's the feeling that it's all on you and you must do everything, that you're the master of your own destiny. And if society or work or school or whatever are changing or robbing you of joy, then it's up to you to take control of your circumstances. And that sounds noble and brave, but it's wrong and unhelpful. You see, especially when some of your circumstances are beyond your control, then trying to control them will actually just increase the cognitive load stress as you become frustrated by the pressures until you have a crash. And that defines a lot of this day today, I think, in this age. Lots of urgent actions, right? Do this now, quick, make these changes. No, wait, do this first thing. No, wait, right, we were wrong the first time, do it the second way, and now it's 180 degrees, but urgently change now to this third new thing, and it's code orange, and it's code red, and it's code red critical, and it's back to code red, and now, quickly change. Trying to control that will actually increase your cognitive load stress, drain your ability, and leave you exhausted and exasperated and anxious in busy work. You end up exhausted with nothing accomplished. You were both busy and unproductive. In the Bible, one of the names that's given to Satan is Beelzebub. It's a bit of a weird word of uncertain origin, but it's often translated as Lord of the Flies, because Baal means Lord, and Zebub can, in some circumstances, mean flies. So Beelzebub is Lord of the Flies, but Zebub doesn't actually mean flies directly. it can mean that, but it's a catch-all word for anything with agitated motion, directionless energy, or restless change. And so if you look at a house fly, right, just buzzing around randomly, it hits your nose, you swat at it, moves around on the table, up, down, around, and it sort of encapsulates that restless energy and directionless motion. And so it can mean fly, but at its core, it means directionless energy. So Beelzebub means the Lord of restless and directionless energy, the god of busyness. Satan is the Lord of frustrated, anxious, and futile busy work, running away from life constantly or working but producing no fruit. So that's kind of the world we live in, a Beelzebub world. And I have to wonder, are those the only options, right? Fight or flight, restless and ineffective. And the answer, if like me, you've come for the answer to this question, is a resounding no. There is a third way. There is a different way you can live. And I'm talking to you right now. I mean, if you're stuck in stress that's shutting you down, or if you're stuck in stress that's causing you to spiral out of control as you try to grasp at things, either way, you're not stuck. There actually is an option. There is a way to thread that needle between completely ineffective and restless and futile. And Jesus models it even under the most stressful situations. And so I want to turn today to the Bible and unpack how God made you, because he made you and he knew about these circumstances and he knew who you were. He formed you in your mother's womb as he planned out the motion of the sun and stars, certainly of this pandemic. You were not made and abandoned to your own mental stress and anxiety and cognitive load. So let's unpack calmly how we can thread this in a healthy way so we can actually grow through this season. So here's the third way. And I want to point out, it's not actually a suggestion or a helpful idea. This is actually a command. And not only is this a biblical command, it is, I can't emphasize this enough, it is the first command given to man by God in the Bible. When man and God first meet, it's the first thing God says to man. We're going to read it. Genesis 1, 26 to 28 says, Then God said, Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. They will rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the livestock, all the earth, and the creatures that crawl on the earth. So God created man in his own image. He created him in the image of God. He created them, male and female. God blessed them and said to them, Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and every creature that crawls on the earth. Did you catch that? Before all of the things that God called us to do about ruling fish and seas and taking care of this earth and subduing it and exercising our dominion, before all of that, what's the first thing God tells man? Be fruitful. Now, as a guy who studied English in university, that's a weird construction of a phrase if you zoom in on it. You see, the word be, in this case, is a passive word, to be, right? It means to remain or to exist, right? You are being. It isn't something you do in the active sense. You don't go, okay, I've got to be now. I'm going to be. I have to be right now. Someone generate this being. You just be. You are. In fact, you're being right now. I hope. I hope you're being right now without even trying. In fact, if I get so boring talking about cognitive load stress that you fall asleep, you're going to continue being even while asleep. That's how natural and easy being is. It's an entirely passive word. But bearing fruit is an action, right? You produce fruit, you pollinate fruit, you make fruit, you bring fruit, whatever the thing is, you eat fruit. God, in his first meeting with man, and I can't, this isn't just some abstract thing for Adam and Eve, this is for you. When God looks at you, all right, he could have told you anything in any different way. He could have said, make fruit, grow fruit, then get it and bring it to me and pile the fruit, right? That's action words. Or he could have gone the other way, and he could have said, enjoy the fruit. sit near my fruit. He could have said, rest in the knowledge of my fruit. And that would have been fully passive. So one is active and kind of fight-y, and one would be passive and kind of flight-y. But God says neither of those things. God says, be fruitful. Rest in productivity. Remain in fruitfulness. Get off the mouse wheel, relax, and together you and God will accomplish more and Sabbath more at the same time. On 6 days God worked, and on the seventh day he rested. Baked right into the creation story, even after be fruitful, is there's things to do, and there's ways to rest, and there's a rhythm, and when you understand it and follow it, you're more productive and more healthy. Where the world's choice is restless or ineffective, and often it's restless and ineffective, God's way is peaceful and fruitful. And the Bible uses one word to sum up this all-important command, and it's the word abide. We're going to unpack that word abide now for the rest of this morning. So I want to dive into John 15, verse 9. It says, now abide in me, and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself. So there's fruitfulness again, right? Be fruitful. How do you be fruitful? Well, you can't do it by yourself. John goes on to say, unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. So all your frantic working is nothing, and all your exhausted collapsing is nothing apart from Christ. If anyone does not abide in me, he's thrown away like a branch and withers, and we are a generation that feels like we're withering. And the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. Be fruitful. Rest in God, abide in God, and you will be fruitful. You will do much. It will be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit. He said, be fruitful, so God is glorified when you are fruitful, and so prove to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. Now, I got to be honest here. I have typically and historically struggled with the word abide. I find it a hard concept because I'm a doer. I like to work, expend energy, get things done, make accomplishments. I'm a fighter. And so I've struggled with this idea of abide because it's typically defined as resting or remaining. There's been a strong focus in our culture and in Christian circles specifically to focus on the be of be fruitful. But that shortchanges the word abide. That's actually not the Hebrew definition of the word abide, and it's not even the full English definition of the word abide. It's one of those words that Christians tend to focus on part of, but not the other part of it. I want to look at the whole rich concept because it's literally God's first command, abide in fruitfulness. And then again in John, abide in my love. If you want to do anything, abide with me. So let's know what abide means. And we can just rack it right back because it is completely in opposition to the ways of our culture, and it's an antidote towards the restless motion and agitated busyness of Satan. Abide is the killer of laziness and the defeater of anxious actions. It breaks both flight and fight. So, what does it mean? Well, abide comes from the Proto-European word bide or abide. So that's where we get the word abide. Seems obvious, right? Abide, abide, done. But it also, through other languages and other ways and other roots, forms the origin of the word confidence, defiance, faith. It means something so much richer than just to patiently bear or to stop and rest, though it carries those meanings too. As a verb, it can be to tolerate, but it can also be to stand or to endure, to sustain, to withstand without yielding or submitting, to abide. So allow me to repackage all of that. Here's what abide means. To powerfully and actively rest in your confidence and faith, to withstand and endure. To abide means to boldly and powerfully trust in God and move in his rhythms. That is so much bigger than to rest. That's a part of it, but it's so much richer. And there's a part for you to play, because to rest sounds like, I said earlier, right? You're going to continue to be even while you're asleep. But abiding is like just something you participate in, that God wants to draw you into and to be a part of. And we can stand boldly on abiding. In fact, in Philippians 1:27, we read it this way. It says, just one thing. Live your life in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. Then, whether I come and see you or I'm absent, I will hear about you and that you are standing firm in one spirit, with one mind, working side by side for the faith that comes from the gospel. Wouldn't you love to know that you were standing firm with everyone else, all the other churches and believers and the rest of the Open Door and everywhere else, standing firm in one spirit, one mind, working side by side for the faith that comes from the gospel? I want that. The word translated standing firm here is, you guessed it, bide, abide. Abide in one spirit. Abide with one mind. Abide in working side by side for the abide, the faith that comes from the gospel. So sometimes it's translated as remain or rest if the translators thought that the original intent was more on that side of things. Sometimes it's stand or persevere or endure to the end. In Revelations it says, if you will abide, you will remain till the end. That's powerful, because it's to powerfully and actively rest in your confidence and faith to withstand and endure. Our culture wants to crush you or tell you what to do or how to behave, and it takes a bide to stand and endure and to be bold and to be restful all at the same time. To abide means to boldly and powerfully trust in God and move in his rhythms. That means being when he's being, resting when he's resting, and doing when he's doing. It's obvious again in Ephesians. It says here in Ephesians 6:10-13, it says, finally, be strengthened by the Lord and by his vast strength. Put on the full armor of God so that you can stand against the tactics of the devil. There you go again. That's abide. You can abide against the tactics of the devil. Be armed and armored so that you can abide. For our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the world powers of this darkness. Keep this in mind. Part of what we are abiding against is demonic, but part of what we are abiding against is the world powers, the force of culture and society that wants you to conform and change to their fight or flight, stress and ineffective thing. We abide against that as believers who rest in the confidence of God. So we abide against the powers of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavens. This is why you must take up the full armor of God, so that you may be able to resist, abide in the evil days, having prepared everything to take your stand. You abide to the end. Look, we are in an evil day. These are evil times. Pestilence, in the form of a pandemic, walks among us. Neighbor turns in neighbor. Wars around the world. There are wars you probably haven't even read about going on right now. There's a civil war unfolding in Ethiopia that's hardly being talked about as we speak. There are microaggressions being formed all over in Kazakhstan right now that aren't even really being talked about. So we have war amongst us. We have famine. This summer saw a plague of locusts in northeastern Africa that hadn't been seen for 45 plus years, devastating unheard of areas. I don't know what's next. Murder hornets, maybe? I don't know. This has been an evil day. And the answer is not to run and hide, nor is it to give in to the more dangerous temptation of restless, anxious busyness. We must abide with each other and with Christ. We must stand in the evil day. Stand with each other, not against your neighbor. Stand for your faith, not against someone else's fear. You don't have to argue with someone else's fear if you have faith. You only have to do that if you're also afraid. Stand for your confidence, not against someone else's anxiety. You don't know what they're dealing with. We must abide, abide, to stand powerfully and actively as we rest in our confidence and faith, to withstand and endure. To abide meaning to boldly and powerfully trust in God and move in his rhythms of work and rest. 1 John 2:17 says it this way, "And the world is passing away along with its desires." I talked 2 weeks ago about how people are given to their passions, given to their desires. Well, John says the world's passing away and its desires are leaving. 1 John. So all of this stress and anxiety and these passions that are boiling over in anger, it's going to pass away. But whoever does the will of God, whoever is fruitful, right, be fruitful, abides forever. There is an eternal rhythm that you can fall into, that you can tap into today, that breaks the cycle of stress, anxiety, overwork, fear, and cognitive load exhaustion. We can powerfully and actively rest in our confidence and faith. We can withstand and endure, but we ought to do it together, and we got to do it with God, abiding in who he is. So this week, my challenge is simple. If you want to abide in Christ this week, if we want to grow a little bit further, here's how it goes. I'm going to do this challenge as well. I'm going to take one thing that I've been doing lately that's been frustrating and fruitless. I don't care how good it is, how good it seems on paper. I'm going to take one thing that's been frustrating and fruitless, and I'm going to stop doing it. I'm going to stop giving in at least one area, to the Lord of restless motion and anxious busyness. I'm just going to give it over to God, and I'm going to get off the path of restless motion. And then I'm going to replace it, because if you don't replace it, it'll just get filled with garbage. And I'm not going to leave a gap in my day for anxiousness or for social media to insert fear or for the news to fill it with worry or whatever else. I'm going to replace it. So I'm going to remove one stress, and I'm going to replace it with something that brings me into a closer rhythm with Christ. It'll look different for you. Maybe you need a nap. Maybe that's what you need to be part of a healthier rhythm. Maybe you need to file your taxes. Maybe you need to work on some personal care or phone a friend. I don't know. But I want to take out one thing of restless busyness and put in deliberately in its place one thing of fruit. So I'm dropping one moment that's just restless motion, and I'm replacing it with one moment that helps me rest in Christ. And you know what? I might not stop with one, but I'm going to start with one, because we got to start somewhere in a rhythm with Christ. And if you do this, if we all do this, I think our world's going to be a little less anxious, a little less reactionary, a little less depressed, and a little less overloaded, and a little more Christ-like. I want to thank you for joining me. I want to encourage you, if you're meeting right now with your friends and immediate family or something like that as you're watching this, actually challenge each other and maybe do some role playing as you discuss what sort of things you could cut or replace it with that might be helpful to you. And please, 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 whatever is helpful to you, don't assume you have to enforce on other people. It's actually something you need to do to remove stress and to replace it with something healthy. Don't assume it's someone else's burden, because what you and I need to do might be very different. In order to abide in Christ together as a church family. I look forward to meeting you guys throughout the week on other online options, possibly, as we maybe do some devotionals and further stuff. And thank you so much for joining us, and see you next week.